I'd like to welcome you all to the NREL seminar. Got the logistics worked out. As you know, Jeff Morissette and I'm Dennis Ojima, have organized the NREL seminar this semester titled Managing Our Natural Resources for a Changing Climate. And we've organized a series of presentations, and today's presentation is by Sept7 Baron, a research scientist here at the Natural Resource Ecology Lab, as well as a research ecologist with the USGS. And Jill probably needs very little introduction to this community. However, I'll give you one. It's really quite impressive. Jill is not only a research ecologist at USGS, but she's also the co-director for the John Wesley Powell Center for Analysis and Synthesis, which is pulling together a lot of interesting research efforts in a cross-disciplinary way for the USGS and partner organizations. Jill received her PhD here at Colorado State University in 1991, Marine Ecosystem Science. After doing her master's at University of Wisconsin and her BS at Cornell University. She first came to Colorado State University in 1981. And that's where she started her research in the Rocky Mountain National Park and surrounding areas. And you'll hear a lot about her research about that today. But in sort of recognizing some of the honors that she's gotten over the years, that in the Department of Interior, she's received a Emeritus Service Award in 2002 and numerous other awards within the USGS and Department of Interior. She served on the committee that really reoriented USGS research and developed the science strategy document, which is being used by the director, Marcia McNutt, today. And last but not least, she's also the incoming president of Ecological Society of America. So it's really a great honor to introduce my wife, Jill Baron, on her talk of vulnerability and adaptation to climate change in Western Mountains.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you all. ESA is actually a very interesting topic, and those of you who are in the graduate degree program in ecology, I'm hoping to develop some more dialogue and getting a whole lot of discussion going about how what should be the directions of the Ecological Society of America and how can we all help make it happen. But today what I'm going to do is sort of what Dennis described. What I wanted to do was place a lot of research that we are funded to do in the context of science in support of natural resource management. And so what you're going to hear is a very broad overview. And any one of these slides, as you'll see as I walk through them, could be a seminar in and of itself. And I'm going to do none of them justice because I'm going to gloss over what is a very large project and explain the overall program to you. And if there are questions, I'm probably capable of answering a little bit of those because we're a very large consortium of very interesting scientists doing interesting work, and I'm no expert in most of what's going on. We have been funded by the U.S. Geological Survey for going on now 15 years to do a Western Mountain, what we call the Western Mountain Initiative, WMI. There's a little logo over here. It was started by researchers working in specific parts of the country. Tom Stolgren was one of the initial PIs on this project, and I'm not quite sure why you aren't anymore, but you're not. Anyhow, this is who we are. And so I'm going to be presenting a little bit of research from every one of these people. These are PIs, and then we have a huge number of collaborators. You'll see them too, and a number of students and postdoctoral fellows. So with the USGS, as part of the Western Mountain Initiative, is Craig Allen, who works down in the southwestern forests based out of northern New Mexico, but now all over the world. Dan Fagery, who works up in Glacier National Park and works on issues of climatology and snow. And Nate Stevenson, who's based out of the Sierra Nevada ecosystems and works on forest processes. We have great Forest Service collaborators, Dave Peterson and Don McKenzie, and a number of university collaborators that are absolutely essential to what we do. Naomi Tague out of Santa Barbara, Andrew Fenton out of Portland State, Jeff Hickey, who's now out of University of Idaho but was here for a while, and Dennis. So our domain is the Western United States. Oh, here's the pointer. Okay. I'm pointing into my thumb. No, I'm not. Okay. But it doesn't really show, so never mind. The important part is that we have long-term research, place-based research at every one of these places. The southwestern Sierra Nevada, the south-central northern New Mexico based on the Jemez Mountains, northern Colorado, the kind of research that I've been doing up in Rocky Mountain National Park and Colorado, and then on a gradient across the Pacific Northwest, ranging from Glacier National Park to a number of national forests and national parks going across. We cross a number of USGS jurisdictional boundaries, which we hope will become more salient to our research in the future as they get going. The North Central Climate Science Center that Dennis and Jeff head up, and that's the reason for this seminar series. And then there's these others. So North Central, Northwest, Southwest, and South Central are these climate science centers. And then there's another Department of Interior or USGS sub-organization called Landscape Conservation Cooperative. Anyhow, this is the area that we work in, and what we try to do is take what we do from our long-term research, try to apply it across the Western United States to come up with emergent ideas of how... Hello. Did we lose the connection? How climate change and other global changes are going to be affecting the Western United States, not just place-based, site-specific research. So our vision for why we do this falls under some, and I should mention that I prepared this talk some time ago and I've updated it, but the initial preparation audience was a bunch of U.S. Geological Survey administrators. So if you see a lot of paper topics here, partly it's a good talking point, but it was also a good way to show that we're a very productive group of scientists. But where we fit in terms of Department of Interior and U.S. Geological Survey vision is that we provide long-term observational data. We maintain those. We interpret causes and consequences of global change to biological populations, land and water. We hope to provide expert interdisciplinary advice on risk. And then we scale up to regional and national scale assessments, widely used, hopefully widely used, actually I know they are, by policymakers, natural resource managers, and we do a lot of interfacing with students and trail groups and mayors and regional groups like that. So our vision for that is what we're actually working after, and that's part of the project. This is a conceptual model that we have developed for this latest round of research, and what we have are pictures instead of words, but they seem to work pretty well. What we have are three aspects of our research. We have detection and attribution of change. We have forecasting and scenarios, and we then take those types of information and work with public land managers for adaptation, preparation for climate change. So and I'm going to walk you through all three of these. That's going to be sort of the remainder of this talk. But under detection and attribution of change, what that means is we do a lot of climatology. That's the climate type of work, climate change part of that. We apply it to forest processes, essentially trees, especially forest disturbance processes. We look at hydrology in mountain watersheds, but we also look at a lot of biogeochemical cycling and processes. That's a lot of work that I do. We combine those together to look at watershed scale properties, hydroecological properties. All of that kind of information goes into a section called forecasting scenarios. Now, some of that is ecosystem modeling, but an awful lot of that is trend and both spatial and temporal trend analysis from dendroecological or paleolimnological type of reconstruction, from just looking at existing trend data from the records that we have today and projecting them forward, and then applying physical principles to say, well, if you're going to have temperatures of this and you're going to have fuels of that, the likelihood of X could be happening. So we do a lot of that work. I'm going to do less description of this box today than that box, but you'll get a little bit of that. And then the adaptation information, we do a lot of work all over the West, increasingly with working groups that we've held, some with Dennis in conjunction, and where we bring together a group of public land managers. And our objective here has been very explicit, not to take one organization at a time, like the National Park Service or the Forest Service, and say, climate change is coming down the road, what are you going to do? What we do instead is try to build regional consortia of organizations on the premise that ecosystem change is going to be system-wide, not political jurisdiction-wide. And so this is a much more difficult, but certainly tractable way of working toward climate change adaptations going into the future. So I'm going to start first by talking through detection and attribution of climate change effects. That's that particular circle up here. And this is a snapshot, again, of the kinds of work we're doing. Again, every one of these slides I'm about to show you could be a seminar in and of itself. That would make an interesting NREL seminar whole semester series. So I apologize in advance because you're going to get the once-over likely. A lot of the work that we've been done, as I'm doing, as we've mentioned, has been climatological. This is work that's often headed up by people from our northeastern part of the WMI group, out of either Bozeman or Glacier National Park. Greg Peterson and Dan Fagery recently published this particular paper, where they did reconstructions using dendroecology and then the existing observational record to look at whether there's been a change in snow water equivalent, SWE, over a long period of time. That's the period of time from 1400 to 1950, and a comparatively short period of time, post-1980, to see whether there's been trends in the amount of snowpack across the western mountains. And as you can imagine, red means less snowpack, and blue means more snowpack. And if you use either the observational record or the reconstructed record from tree rings, you can see that over the most recent period and over the longer period of time, there's been an anomalous, there's been less snowpack in the northern Rocky Mountains over time, no matter whether you use observations or dendroecological reconstruction. So what does that mean? We're getting less and less snowpack, specifically if you go from, say, mid-Wyoming up north. It's, depending on which of the reconstructions you actually use, the observational records say that down here in Colorado we're getting a little bit less snow over the past 20 years. The dendroecological reconstructions say, well, we're not getting a whole lot of change in snowpack overall. But this is a good tool for people to start thinking about. And if I was living up in Montana, this would be not only noticeable, but it would be a topic that would suggest that public land managers ought to be thinking about how to manage their lands under less winter snow. We have studies that have been done. This is another very nice portrayal of how snowpack is changing over time, or could be used for how snowpack is changing over time. This is work that was done by Kara Moore, who's a student right here. She finished her work just recently, this past May. She was a student of Stephanie Kahn. She worked with us on the Western Mountain Initiative. What she took was a very simple, but I think elegant approach toward looking at where snow is most likely to be vulnerable to changing climate. So first she took, she took average data and she plotted where there was seasonal snow. So this is snow that persists until April 1st or later. And so that's what this map is of. Well, here's a map of elevation over here, and also where the snow cover actually persists. And then she overlaid on that the 2000 to 2010 January, February, March temperatures to say, well, those temperatures that are closest to freezing, ones around 28 to 34 degrees centigrade Fahrenheit, those are the temperatures that are going to be most vulnerable to warming with springtime warming. And then she made a series of overlays of these elevations to show which areas are going to have perhaps more vulnerability to global warming, to climate warming, than other areas. And I think it's a really good visual tool that can be used, again, for public land managers. So remember, they're not necessarily trained as scientists. And so visual tools are very effective for suggesting, well, my area might be vulnerable, might be time for us to start thinking about adaptation to climate change. So here's another paper by Grace Peterson, again showing that as Northern Hemisphere warms, so goes western Montana. And that's what these series of lines are showing. Again, existing data, observed data, going from the year 2000 up to 1900 to about 2000. The red line is the 5-year moving average for western Montana. You can see that it starts, these are anomalies again from the long-term mean being for this entire period of record. You can see that there's been a warming trend in the western Montana 5-year moving average, and it tracks almost identically to the whole northern hemisphere. So we're warming especially up in the northern Rockies, and again, these are the kinds of tools that we use to work with public land managers. These are not necessarily models that say sometime in the future we'll be warming. These are existing data that I find very powerful when I talk to public land managers. Things are changing, and they're changing rapidly now. Okay, so that's the climate. The interesting thing is sort of so what? So what does this mean? And this is still falling under detection and attribution. We worked very closely with Andrew Fountain at Portland State University. He just published a paper in Bioscience where he talked about what's happening as our small mountain glaciers melt. Here's a picture of mountain glaciers. I'll show you this in a second again. But this is the portal actually to a website. If you're interested, if you go to Portland State University and look at glaciers, he's got all kinds of wonderful before and after pictures, as well as animations of glacier decline over the Pleistocene into the Holocene into the Anthropocene for all kinds of parts of the western U.S. So it's very cool. So in the ecological responses in this particular bioscience article that they talked about, again, ecological, not hydrological, they talked about changes to aquatic and terrestrial flora and fauna, and they talked about changes to biogeochemical processes. And I'll pick up again on those biogeochemical processes in a second. But one of the things that Andrew has done, and I think this is just really cool, is he's identified all the glacier locations in the lower 48 states of America. And those are these red dots. The green is Forest Service land. There's sort of a beige color, that's Park Service land. But the red dots are where the glaciers exist today. There's some 8,300 of them living on the land surface. And he has gone ahead and looked at how they have actually declined over time since 1900. So some of that is certainly just post-Pleistocene meltback as we've warmed our climate, but the rapidity of change over the past 20 to 30 years is certainly unique in our history coming back. So more than 66% of the glacier mass in Glacier National Park is gone. 56 in Sierra Nevada, about 40% of our glaciers have declined over time. So they're going away. This is going to be a thing of the past. In Glacier, they anticipate by the year 2020 there will be no more permanent snow up there. So what? Come back to melting glaciers, that's still just ice. Those are big lumps of ice on the ground. They're attractive, but what do? Well, they change things. And we have noticed in the work we've been doing up in Lawfare Watershed and now across more of the Rocky Mountains, that there are very strong biogeochemical responses as well as microbial responses to climate change. And the paper that sort of kicked off our hypotheses came out a few years ago. Melanie was a co-author on this paper, Melanie Hartman, Travis Schmidt, who was now with the U.S. Geological Survey. What we found is that in late summer, not snowmelt, in late summer we were seeing large excursions of nitrate, which is a fertilizer, and it was unrelated to atmospheric nitrogen deposition, which is a question we had been exploring for many years. We also see a large increase in weathering products, and we're not alone. This kind of phenomenon has been observed up in Alberta and British Columbia, in Greenland, in other parts of the Rocky Mountains, and now we're exploring where else in the West it actually occurs. So melting ice alters this biogeochemistry. It does that through changes in weathering rates and microbial response. We recognize that it's a transient response. So this is a hydrologic depiction of what happens as glaciers melt. You get some amount of water every late summer as glaciers melt. Over time, as your glaciers are, if glaciers are persistent and they're not declining over time, you could envision that you see a certain amount of discharge each late summer as some of it melts. As the glacier then actually starts to go backwards Um, there. Okay. Glaciers are melting now. That's where we are. It's going to happen. Once they're gone, we're going to go back to some lower level of hydrologic discharge over time. But what we're studying right now is what happens as these glaciers are declining. And recognize they're exposing sediments, they're increasing weathering rates, they may be exposing all kinds of glacial flower materials that are then leaching out. They are creating new habitats for microbes and other types of vegetation. So we are trying to look at that. That's a very active question for my own research group. We've been looking at ice concentrations as well as stream sediments and stream water chemistry. We've been looking not only in Loch Vale, but all over Rocky Mountain National Park and in Spraywas and zooming into Oregon. So this is my field crew from recently. We've got Tim on the lower left. We've got Jared in the middle and Gunnar Johnson. We also have Jared here taking an ice course. This one was for Andrews Glacier. We have Brooke Osborne, who did this as her master's thesis, asking what happens microbially. Do you increase your nitrifying bacteria if you expose glacier sediments that have been covered over for the past 400 to 500 years? Because these are little ice age glaciers right here. I'm happy to say Brooke will be back. She will be back in October to actually write up the results of her thesis as a paper. So we're all looking forward to that. Here's Ed Hall. He's been working on this project and, of course, driving a lot of the intellect behind it. That is at NREL. He's a microbial ecologist, also with the Ecological Survey. And we've also added Claudia Boot to our team, who's looking at the organic carbon changes that occur as glaciers decline. And together, Ed, Claudia, and myself and Caroline are looking at then what that means for microbial activity and microbial assemblages. And ultimately, long-term ecosystem chemistry, biogeochemistry, as it moves downstream. So that's all you're going to get on our research, but there will be great seminars over time coming from Ed, Claudia, and Jared. So let me move on to more detection and attribution, talk about impacts on forests, and I'm going to run you through, maybe race you, the kinds of studies that my colleagues do. There's a lot of work being done on background tree mortality across the western U.S., heat and drought-related forest die-offs, insect outbreaks, and finally wildfires. So the background tree mortality is done by our colleagues based out of Sierra Nevada. Phil Van Antcombe and Nate Stevenson are located here, and they have a unique data set that they've been mining and then applying all over the world. And you can, everywhere that they have these long-term data sets, well, they've used colleagues. Tom Devlin, for instance, took samples in Colorado. These are yearly plots that are revisited to look at tree dynamics, especially tree mortality. And in this particular diagram, the larger the red dot or the blue dot, the greater the mortality that has been observed over the past 30 years that they've been doing these annual tree plots, which I think is an incredible amount of field work. But they've been using this to great effect. So basically what they have found, and these are papers that have been coming out over time, what they have found is an increase in background tree mortality. So this isn't fire, this isn't wildfires. This is just trees that are upping and dying, healing over and dying, for possibly unknown reasons, but it looks to me as if it's a drought stress type of response. It looks to them as if it's a drought stress response. They see this regardless of whether they look in forests in the Pacific Northwest, in California, or the interior, which is basically Colorado and Idaho. They see it regardless of the elevation. That's the upper right-hand bar. You see an increase in mortality over time from 1960-ish to 2010 or so. You see it regardless of the DBH of the trees. Little trees, big trees, all of them are susceptible. You see an increase in the background tree mortality rate. You see it regardless of the genus, with the only exception being junipers. So junipers are seen to be exempt from this thing, but firs, pinus, hemlock, and also Doug fir, those are all increasing in their mortality rate, and you see it regardless of the age of the tree. So in other words, there's a phenomenon going on, and its background tree mortality is increasing. And another of our colleagues, Craig Allen, has been able to show that this is increasing worldwide. And it's directly related, the more they do this ecological research, to in specific drought stress. I don't know if I have another slide. No. So one of the things we did recently, a couple of years ago, is we've been working with Nate McDowell at Los Alamos Lab, and we have been coring trees all over the West, including in Loch fail my long-term study site. Scoring trees that are recently dead compared to trees that are adjacent to them that are not yet dead, and using tree ring width, but also carbon isotopes to determine whether there's a difference in their response. And sure enough, the trees that are recently dead show a much different carbon isotopic signature suggestive of drought stress than the trees that are adjacent and still alive. So there's a microhabitat thing going on, but apparently sufficient enough that across the West this microhabitat drying is probably responsible for killing off these trees. So trees are dying. Trees are dying over the background. Trees are also up and dying in massive amounts, particularly in the southwestern United States. And I'm not going to show you that picture you've all seen before of the pinon forest in the Jemez Mountains where all the pinons are dead, because you've seen it before. But basically, where you have warming temperatures, and I show that we have warming temperatures, not just during snow, but also during summer events, where you have warming temperatures and you have drought, and we've been through a 10 to 15 year period of drought. Most recently, you stress these trees to the extent where entire forests at ecotonal boundaries have keeled over and died. And Craig Allen has been leading this charge. He has a couple of papers, one with Park Williams as the lead and another with Shears, by showing that this is a phenomenon that's occurring all over the southwestern United States, as well as in many forests around the world in arid environments. Australia, Spain, other parts of the Mediterranean, parts of Africa, parts of South America. So we're seeing extreme die-offs. We're also seeing this background tree mortality increasing. I probably don't need to go into at all the work that's been done on pine bark beetle and insect outbreaks, and I won't go too much into it. This was one of the foundation papers that got us going. Jeff Hickey did this work. Jesse Logan, who also used to be here at NREL a long time ago. The story, of course, being warmer temperatures allow these beetles to go through more rapid life cycles. Perhaps forest management practices have allowed more biomass to reach the stage where the beetles can be effective. Drought and warm temperatures prohibits the trees themselves from putting up the defenses. We have tremendous amounts of forest die-off, and you only have to look out the door in order to see that. I'm not sure Jeff actually made this map, but it's very effective. It shows throughout the West the vast acreage that's been affected by beetle kill of some kind or another. The blue is the Ips beetle that affects a lot of southwestern and western types of species. Mountain pine beetle is this red area that's taken over. It's like the tomato that ate British Columbia. And the spruce beetle we see even in Colorado. So vast areas. And Jeff has, and Craig Allen have been asking kinds of so what questions. Yes, beetle kill is very dramatic and extensive. They've been asking how it affects carbon storage. They've been asking how beetle kill compares to fire in terms of its impact. And the slide that Jeff showed, which is very effective, is that the amount of carbon affected by beetle kill is much greater than that affected by wildfires in the western United States. Still, in spite of the fact that we're seeing increased spatial extent of wildfires, particularly in dry years. And as you can imagine, beetle kill as well as fire contributes to forests in many parts of the West becoming carbon sources to the atmosphere rather than carbon sinks, at least for now. Okay, wildfire. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I know far less about what the work that you're doing. But this is work that Jeremy did when he was a PhD student working with us, and with Don McKenzie and Dave Peterson in this particular paper with Tony Westerling. What they found, which may not be a surprise to any of you, is that you have different types of climatic regimes affecting the propensity for wildfire. In the mountains, where you have wildfire, the burnt area is negatively correlated with the year of the fire precipitation. Okay, that's a no-brainer. Get less precipitation, you're likely to have more fire. But it's positively correlated with the year of fire temperature. Again, a no-brainer. Warmer temperatures, low precipitation, just like this summer, you're likely to have big fires. The reason for that is that you dry the existing fuels, many of which have been exacerbated by perhaps past forest management practices. That's very different if you go into the southwest grasses and shrublands as well as southwestern forests, where the burnt area has been positively correlated with the year preceding, the precipitation for the year preceding. And what that does is it builds up your fuels so that when you do have a dry dry, warm year, you're able to have these fires persist and expand. So I don't know if that was a novel result. I seem to recall Tom Vedlin making that point in a paper some time ago, but a particularly nice depiction of that type of spatial phenomena. So not all fires are alike. And that's a very important message, maybe not for you guys to understand and get it, but for resource managers who for many years, if they weren't subject matter experts, would say, oh, forest management is all forests are the same, and we need to manage them the same. And this is a powerful tool for saying, no, you don't want to do this. You want to take a much more local and nuanced approach to this. And one way to do that, and I'm going to do my best to explain this paper, and if I fail, I might fail. One way to do that is from a paper that Don just published. The title tells you that it's highly theoretical. Power laws reveal phase transition in landscape control of fire regime. What he did in all of these watersheds throughout the state of Washington, they used dendrochronological data to reconstruct fire history. And from that, then they took topographic data to look at topographic complexity. And what they found is that the propensity for fire, or increased risk of fire, increases according to a power law, except where the topographic complexity is such that fires can't spread across a landscape. So they actually take this highly theoretical paper and suggest that you could mimic, if you wanted to manage the spread of wildfire, perhaps you could mimic this kind of topographic complexity on the ground if you knew where on the landscape fires were likely to spread, and that's part of what the power law showed. And then you could maybe manage the spread and extent of fire by applying these types of theories to it. And so this paper just came out. I think it has yet to be applied, but I think it's a very interesting approach toward deciding how you're going to manage on the landscape, because chances are fires will become more intense, more frequent, and more widespread with warming over time. Okay, so that was detection and attribution of climate change, the kind of research that we do. And honestly, I have to say that's where the bulk of our research falls, because it's fun and exciting. We then take it to forecasting scenarios, which is this particular block here. And as I mentioned before, I'm not going to go tremendously into detail with that. I will talk a little bit about some of the modeling that we're doing. We work with Naomi Taig out of Santa Barbara, and a model that she helped develop. Actually, she is now the major developer of this model. It's called RESIS, Regional Hydroecological Simulation System. It's a spatially distributed dynamic model of a couple of ecological, meteorological, geological, and hydrological processes. It was initially built off of physiological models that Steve Dunning helped develop from the University of Montana, and Larry Band, a geographer, who spread it across the landscape. So she takes the kind of empirical data that we all provide, watershed level data, and she uses that in order to parameterize these models and ask questions about what if, using various scenarios. Most of the scenarios are sensitivity analyses. We'll take a model, we'll apply it to an area, we'll run it for the years of record that we actually have, and then we'll do what happens if we raise the temperature plus 2 degrees, plus 4 degrees. What happens if we raise the springtime temperature? So we do those kinds of types of scenarios over time. One of the places that she's been applying this, and it's really very exciting because it seems to be working, is this area in the southwestern United States, in New Mexico, where they've been looking at the physiological responses to mortality. I mentioned Nate McDowell before. So again, this is work that Nate's been doing with Craig Allen. And these are extant data. They come from dendrometers on a bunch of ponderosa pine data. And what they find is, depending on the elevation, which is the surrogate for water stress, you see changes in tree, whatever dendrometers. Trees expand with water and they contract when they're drier. I'm a biogeochemist, I'm sorry. So these are data. And at low elevations, over the months, you can see increasing amounts of difference. This is cumulative basal area increment difference between wet and dry. So over the months as it gets drier during the summertime, you can see a greater change in the ponderosa pines at the lowest elevation than those at the highest elevations, which really don't change at all because they're not water stressed. They get enough moisture, probably from orographic precipitation and cooler temperatures over time. So they took this and they mapped it on the landscape, and that's what this is up here on this top right portion. This is actually little frijoles. Watershed doesn't matter. It's in Bandelier National Monument. Low elevation is on the bottom of this map. High elevation is on the top and in the green. Yellow is pinyon juniper woodland. The ponderosa pine forest is green, and the areas are red. That are red are the areas where ponderosa pine did persist and have recently died off. They have tree ring records for all of these trees, and applied this physiological idea that carbon starvation due to water stress is what's killing these trees off, and then they modeled it using a series of scenarios. So the baseline map for the Frijoles Basin, that's what that is. That's actually the same basin. The baseline shows that there's an area of higher risk toward carbon starvation and tree mortality in lower elevations. That's not a surprise. And that it expands under these scenarios of +2 and +4, and you actually can recreate the tree mortality that occurs. So what it means is that the model is actually giving us results that make a lot of sense. Models are tools that can be used to generate hypotheses. They can also be used as powerful tools to show managers what might happen under different types of scenarios, and that's how we're applying them today. Some of the other scenarios and forecasting we're doing is looking across the West and looking at combined disturbances that may occur with fire and insect outbreaks and increasing temperatures and increasing water stress. This is something that recently came out with that Jeff Hickey did, and these are actually slightly declining carbon stocks over time for several different types of species, suggesting that with combined disturbances, we're likely to see less carbon on the landscape. That also translates to less, probably, forests on the landscape. There's a number of assumptions here, none of which I probably know very well to describe as to whether you would see forests regrow over time. But again, this is a good management tool to suggest that, especially for resource managers of public lands, you can't think about one threat at a time. And very often when we talk, especially as Forest Service managers, we say, let's talk about climate change. And they go, I can't, I'm dealing with beetle kill. And you try to say, that's the same thing. But they don't get it. Or over time, they're beginning to get it. But then when you say beetle kill and fire and water stress and perhaps changes to your hydrology, we're trying to do that in a way that doesn't frighten them off. And instead gets them to larger, multi-scale. So I'm gonna end with how we're doing that. That's this hands-on leadership in adaptation and mitigation plans. And so that's this bar over here. And this is actually very interesting, and this is work that has been continuing for about 7 or 8 years, and we're ramping up again with the climate science centers and with Dennis and Jeff. So we've held a number of workshops over time, and these and these workshops have happened all over the West. I could say we've all run these, those of us who were part of the Western Mountain Initiative, and then we're revisiting many of these areas and coming back. Part of the way to build long-term science manager partnerships and to really implement change is to not do one-off types of activities. We go in, we work with them, again, cross-boundary. We call these bridging boundaries because it's not just Park Service, it's Forest Service, it's tribes, it's counties, it's cities. We bring them all together to talk as a group about what can happen regionally and how can we best manage them together. So the Forest Service just published this thing. We all had a big hand in it. It's a guidebook. I'm sure people are using the guidebook, but what really helps is you go physically plant yourself in their region and you talk to them all the time and you work over and over. And that's because this is the way they view climate change. It makes it very hard, and it's very paralyzing for many resource managers to say, I'm going to deal with climate change right now. It's either damned if you do or damned if you're not. So what we've been doing is going in with a philosophy for adaptation that says that the onset and continuance of climate change, in addition to all the other stresses they already deal with today, the invasive species, the air and water pollution, the habitat fragmentation, they all deal with those on a regular basis. In addition, the onset and continuance of climate change means you've got to think differently about how you manage these lands than you have in the past. And so it becomes a social science issue as well as a scientific one. Preparing for and adapting to climate change is such a cultural and intellectual intellectual challenge as it is a scientific one. We can all talk till we're blue in the face about the trends that we're seeing and what it means, but until they believe it, until they actually say, okay, now I'm ready to do something, then it's not going to be enough. So this is a large part of our measurements, our arguments as well. Uncertainty does not equal ignorance. We know a lot. So we work with resource managers to address climate change effects as risk, to address adaptation specifically as risk management. And then we talk about a framework for adapting, and this is where we are. And we're actually starting up a very cool program again in Rocky Mountain, in northern Colorado, in Rocky Mountain National Park, to establish a long-lasting science management partnership to work on building trust and community, not just with scientists and the managers, but among the managers themselves. Parks and Wildlife in Colorado, along with the Forest Service, along with the Park Service, along with the mayor of Estes Park. All of these people need to work together if we're going to develop a regional program that works. We want to identify scenarios for future conditions. I personally like to do this with a napkin in the back of the envelope. You know things are going to get warmer and drier. What would happen if? So there's a lot of ways you can do that. We evaluate vulnerability and risk. The Park Service themselves have been very proactive in doing that. I think the Forest Service lags some, but they're coming along. And then talk about win-win types of solutions. If you reduce your atmospheric nitrogen deposition, you reduce the vulnerability of your alpine flora to drought, for instance. There's a win-win type of solution. And then, of course, monitoring.